The morning I signed the divorce papers, my mother-in-law sent flowers to my house. Not sympathy flowers. Not even a card that said she was sorry for how things had gone. She sent the kind of arrangement you send to someone who won something. White lilies in a crystal vase. And when I called the florist to find out who had placed the order, the woman on the phone read me the handwritten note that was supposed to accompany the bouquet. It said, "Now things can go back to the way they were meant to be." I set the phone down on the kitchen counter. I looked at those flowers for a long time. And I thought, she has no idea what I already set in motion 6 weeks ago. My name is Marlo Hensley. I am 35 years old, and I grew up in a yellow ranch house on Birchwood Drive in Clover Hill, Virginia, which is a town that smells like cut grass in summer and wood smoke in October, and has one hardware store, 2 diners, and a Presbyterian church where every family in our neighborhood had a pew they thought of as theirs, even if nobody ever actually said so out loud. My father was a contractor. My mother taught 3rd grade for 27 years. We had a vegetable garden in the backyard, a Labrador named Captain, and a rule at dinner that you had to put your phone away before you sat down. I did not know at the time that this kind of childhood was something people spent their whole adult lives trying to rebuild. I was 24 when I met James Calloway at a friend's 4th of July party. He was standing by the cooler in a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and he had this way of listening, really listening, like whatever you said was the most interesting thing he had heard all week. I am telling you this because I want you to understand that what happened later was not a failure of intelligence on my part. You do not fall for a man like James Calloway because you are foolish. You fall for him because he is very, very good at making you feel chosen. We dated for 2 years. He proposed on the back deck of his parents' lake house in the Blue Ridge Mountains on a Sunday evening in September, and the ring was his grandmother's, a Marquise diamond in a platinum setting that caught the last of the light like something from a movie. I said yes before he finished the sentence. I was 26 years old, and I thought the hardest part of my life was behind me. The wedding was in May. Outdoor ceremony, white tent reception, 214 people, a band that played Motown and classic rock until 11 o'clock. My mother cried during the father-daughter dance. My father whispered something in my ear that I have kept to myself ever since. James's mother, Diane Calloway, stood at the reception with a champagne flute in her hand and told every person who came within earshot that the wedding colors were a little too informal for her taste. Nobody heard her say it. Nobody except me. That was the first note of something I chose not to hear. And if you have ever stood in the happiest moment of your life and felt a door close somewhere you could not quite see, stay with me. Subscribe if you haven't already, because this story is going somewhere, and I promise you will not want to miss where it ends up. Diane Calloway was 61 years old when I married her son. She was the kind of woman who kept her house at 68 degrees no matter the season, who arranged the throw pillows on her sofa in a precise overlapping pattern after anyone sat down, and who referred to the first 4 years of James's life, before they moved from Richmond to Clover Hill, as when things were right. I did not understand what that phrase meant for a long time. I understand it now. James worked in commercial real estate. He was good at it. By year 3 of our marriage, we had bought a colonial on Sycamore Lane, 3 bedrooms, a finished basement, a kitchen I had repainted twice until the color was exactly the warm ivory I had carried around in my head for years. We had a daughter. Her name was Nora. She came into the world at 6:52 on a Tuesday morning in February, 7 pounds and 4 ounces, with her father's dark hair and something around the eyes that was entirely her own. I lay in that hospital bed holding her and felt like the architecture of my whole life had just revealed its purpose. That is not a small thing to feel. I want you to hold on to it because it matters to what comes later. The erosion did not happen all at once. That is the thing no one tells you about a marriage falling apart. It does not crash. It seeps. It starts with small things you explain away because you love the person and you are tired and life is busy and you have a baby who woke up 4 times last night. James started taking calls in his car after dinner. He started having opinions about my friendships, subtle ones, the kind delivered as observations rather than objections. Your friend Dana seems like she doesn't have a lot going on. You two spend a lot of time together. He said it lightly. He said it twice. Dana and I had been friends since 7th grade. By Nora's 2nd birthday, I had stopped calling Dana as much. I told myself I was just busy. I was busy. But I was also being slowly, gently redirected away from the people who would have told me what they were seeing from the outside. Do you know what that feels like? When you realize later that a person you trusted spent years quietly rearranging the furniture of your life while you were distracted loving them. Have you ever looked back at a span of time and understood that you were being managed? I need you to sit with that question, because what I found out in year 7 is going to reframe everything I just told you. The first crack I could not explain away happened on a Thursday night in March. Nora was 3. I had put her to bed and come downstairs to find James on the phone in the kitchen. He had his back to the doorway. His voice was low. I caught 3 words before he turned and saw me. 3 words, not yet ready. He ended the call quickly. He said it was work. A deal that wasn't closing. I nodded. I went to the refrigerator and got a glass of water. I stood there for a moment after he went upstairs, and I turned those 3 words over in my mind like a stone you find in a garden that is heavier than it looks. I did not look at his phone. I want to be honest about that. I had the chance. It was sitting on the counter. I chose not to. I am not sure whether that was dignity or denial. Maybe both. But that night was the night some part of me began keeping a file. Not a literal one. A quiet running accounting in the back of my mind of every small thing that did not match the story I was being told. Not yet ready. For what? For whom? The answer came 14 months later. And it came from the last place I expected. It was Diane, James's mother. The woman who sent the lilies. She did not mean to tell me. I am certain of that. We were at her house on a Sunday in May for James's birthday dinner. I had arrived early to help set the table, her china, white with a thin blue border, 40 place settings stored in a mahogany cabinet she had received as a wedding gift in 1979. I was folding napkins in the dining room and Diane was in the kitchen on the phone, and she did not hear me come in the back door. I heard the word Danielle before I heard anything else. And then, he is being patient. And then, it was never going to work out with Marlo long term. We all knew that. And then, once the timing is right. I stood in that dining room holding a folded napkin and I understood, in the space of about 4 seconds, that this conversation had been happening for a long time. That there was a woman named Danielle. That James's mother was not a bystander. That the phrase not yet ready, the one I had heard 14 months earlier in my own kitchen, was a timeline. A patient, organized timeline that included my husband and his mother and a woman I had never heard of. I set the napkin on the table. I placed the salad fork to the left of the dinner fork. I finished setting the table. I went into the kitchen and I said, "Can I get the serving bowl for the potatoes?" And Diane looked at me for a half second too long before she said, "Top shelf, left cabinet." She had no idea I had heard a single word. That is the thing about women like Diane Calloway. They believe they are careful. They are careful. But careful people are also sometimes so confident in their carefulness that they forget there is another careful person in the room. I sat through that birthday dinner, and I watched my husband laugh at his own jokes and pour wine for his father and wink at Nora across the table when she spilled her milk, and I thought about every Sunday dinner at this table for 7 years. I thought about the way Diane always placed me at the far end, away from James. The way she asked about my parents' house in Clover Hill, still using that word, house, never home. The way she'd once said, so gently it barely registered, that James had always had a lot of female friends from home. From home. Danielle was from home. I did not cry on the drive back. Nora fell asleep in her car seat. James played something on the radio, a country station, and he reached across the console and put his hand on my knee the way he always did on long drives, and I looked at his hand and thought, I have about 6 weeks to figure out what I am going to do. I want to pause here for just a moment and say something to whoever is listening right now, if you are watching this and something in this story feels familiar. If you have been sitting quietly in your own house with your own version of a folded napkin and a secret you are not yet ready to act on, I see you. The silence before you move is not weakness. It is preparation. Stay with me. I did 4 things in the 6 weeks after that dinner. The first thing I did was call my college roommate, Patricia Aldridge, who is now a family law attorney in Charlottesville. I called her from the parking lot of a grocery store on a Wednesday morning after I dropped Nora at preschool. I told her what I had heard. I told her the timeline as I understood it. Patricia said two things. She said, "You need documentation." And she said, "Do not let him know you know." The second thing I did was begin quietly documenting our finances. James handled our accounts. I had always been comfortable with that because I trusted him and because I was busy and because he was, I believed, careful. What I found when I actually looked, and Patricia told me exactly what to look for, was a pattern of transfers to an account I had never seen. Small ones, spread out over 2 years. Amounts that individually could be explained as business expenses. Collectively, they told a story about a man who had been building a separate cushion very deliberately, very quietly, for a very long time. The third thing I did was call my father. I had not told my parents any of this. My mother would have cried. My father listened to the whole thing without interrupting, and when I finished, he was quiet for about 10 seconds, and then he said, "Do you need money to get this right?" I said I did not know yet. He said, "You call me when you do." That was all. But it was everything. The fourth thing I did was find Danielle. I am not going to tell you how. I will tell you that it was not difficult, and that once I found her, I understood that this had been going on for 3 years. Not 14 months. 3 years. Danielle lived 20 minutes from Clover Hill, in the town where James had grown up. She was 32. She worked at a veterinary practice. She had no idea that I knew. She had, as far as I could tell, no idea that I existed as anything other than a problem with a timeline. I did not contact her. This is important. She was not my problem to solve. She was a symptom. The thing I needed to address was structural, not personal. I met with Patricia 3 times over those 6 weeks. I signed nothing that James put in front of me without her reading it first. I photographed every document in our home office. I opened my own account at a different bank. I moved 3 months of personal savings into it. I did all of this the way I used to do things as a child, the way my mother taught me, quietly, completely, without making a sound. The night before I told James the first news, I sat at the kitchen table after he went to sleep and I looked at our house. The ivory walls. The photographs from our wedding on the hallway shelf. Nora's rain boots by the back door, one of them tipped on its side. I had loved this life. I want to be honest about that. I had loved it fully, without reservation. And some part of me grieved it the way you grieve a house after a fire, not the house itself, but the version of yourself who lived inside it. I told him the next morning after Nora left for school. I sat across from him at the kitchen table. I said, "I know about Danielle. I know about the account. I know the timeline." I said it the way Patricia had coached me to say it, which was flat and clear and specific, like I was reading items off a list. James went white. He started to say something. I said, "I have retained Patricia Aldridge. I have copies of everything. My number is not up for negotiation." He said one thing. He said, "How long have you known?" I said, "Long enough." That was the only power I claimed out loud. The rest was paperwork. The divorce took 4 months. James hired an attorney from Richmond. There were negotiations. Patricia was better than his attorney, which I had known when I hired her. Nora would live primarily with me. The house would be sold and the equity divided. The transfers from the hidden account were documented and factored into the settlement. It was not the ending I had planned for my marriage. But it was an ending I had walked toward with my eyes open, on my own terms, and that made all the difference. 2 weeks after the papers were signed, the white lilies arrived. And I stood there in my kitchen looking at them, this kitchen with the ivory walls I had chosen, in the house that was now mine until the sale closed, and I thought about Diane Calloway putting that order in. The confidence of it. The certainty that things were simply snapping back to their intended shape. She did not know about the letter. I had written it 3 weeks before I told James. I wrote it on a Sunday afternoon while Nora was at my parents' house in Clover Hill. I wrote it on the good stationery I kept in the bottom desk drawer, the cream-colored paper my mother gave me when I graduated college, the kind you save for things that matter. I addressed it to Diane. I wrote 4 paragraphs. The first was what I knew. The second was what I had documented. The third was the name of my attorney and the specific section of our settlement agreement that addressed the hidden account and the fact that it had been flagged in discovery as potential financial fraud. The fourth paragraph was one sentence. It said, "I hope you enjoy the flowers." I did not mail the letter the day I wrote it. I kept it in the desk drawer. I took it out and read it twice in those 3 weeks. It did not need to be sent to do its work. The work it was doing was entirely for me. What I did send was different. 3 days after the lilies arrived, I wrote a letter to a young woman named Corinne Backer. Corinne was 21. She was the daughter of my neighbor Linda Backer, who had lived next door to me on Sycamore Lane for 5 years, who brought me soup when Nora had the flu, who knocked on my door the morning after I told James the first news and said, simply, "I'm here if you need anything." Linda's daughter Corinne was a junior at James Madison University, studying nursing, and she had applied for a scholarship that would cover her last year's tuition. The scholarship application required a professional letter of recommendation from someone in a relevant field. Linda had asked me, apologetically, weeks before all of this, if I knew anyone. I had said I would think about it. I had more than thought about it. I wrote to 3 people on Corinne's behalf. Dr. Patricia Reed, who ran the clinical nursing program at UVA and who I had met through a hospital fundraiser years before. Robert Caldwell, who served on the board of the Virginia Nursing Foundation. And the director of the scholarship program herself, to whom I wrote a personal note on my own stationery explaining what I had watched Corinne do. The way she accompanied her mother to every one of Linda's chemotherapy appointments the year Linda had breast cancer. The way she asked questions at every appointment. The way she took notes in a small spiral notebook and then researched every term she didn't understand. I told the director that Corinne Backer was the kind of person the nursing profession needed, not because she wanted a career, but because she already understood what it meant to care for someone. Corinne received the scholarship 6 weeks later. Linda knocked on my door at 7 in the morning with a coffee cake and could not finish a sentence for crying. I stood on my porch in my pajamas and I hugged her, and Nora came to the door in her socks asking what was happening, and it was in the middle of all of it, one of the best mornings I had had in years. That is the part Diane Calloway will never know about. The letters I wrote. The way I spent those 6 weeks. She will know about the settlement. She may know, eventually, about the documentation. But she will not know that while I was quietly, carefully dismantling what her son had built on a lie, I was also using what I had, every connection, every piece of paper, every ounce of whatever I'd earned in 7 years of building a real life, to put something good into the world for someone who deserved it. Nora is 4 now. She started a science camp at the community center last month, and she comes home every Saturday with something she has made, a pinwheel, a paper circuit, last week a model of the solar system out of styrofoam balls and wooden skewers. She put it on the kitchen table and explained every planet to me in order, and when she got to Saturn she looked up and said, "Mama, did you know Saturn's rings are made of ice?" I said I did not know that. She said, very seriously, "You should probably know that." I said she was right. I should probably know that. The ivory kitchen is still the color I chose. The house is under contract now, and I have found an apartment in Charlottesville, closer to Patricia, closer to the life I am building without the architecture someone else designed for me. I took the framed wedding photograph off the hallway shelf last week, and behind it on the wall was a small, perfect square of paint that hadn't faded the way the rest had. Brighter. Protected all these years by the frame. I stood there and looked at it for a moment. And then I painted over it.